Acho que agora sim, né?
Well, ready to go? Good evening, all of you. As I've said, my name is Daniela Rushka Badur. I have the honor to open and to be the moderator for our event that is the first Congress for Peace and Nonviolence Education and continuation the work and in memory of our late Sergio Storch. In this first meeting, pre-event meeting, we have great names of Brazilian education, and this is a Congress that passed through 2 years of preparation time, and finally, in this very moment, is becoming a reality, and it's a great joy of us, of ours, to be here, to be crazy aware, you know, those crazy and aware fellows, that because, well, it's a tireless work, but we are united for a very noble and difficult purpose, that is building peace and keep it peaceful. And well, and in those days that wars are a trend, we go as a counter current promoting peace. So today we'll have the satisfaction to listen to David Windholz, Dr. Roberto Crema, and Dr. Alessandra Gaidargi as well. And to close our event, Dr. Alberto Salles Filho. Dr. Roberto Crema, just a brief introduction. Director of Edupaz, the greatest knower of Pierre Weil in Brazil, the art of caring, and doing this line of ecology, we'll have Alessandra, and with Ney, with a strong base of bullying and violence, daily violence, but and the process of education, action and reflection on education. And now I pass to introduce our dear Congress President, the Chairman, David Windholz, reading a little bit of his biography. President of our Congress, a bachelor degree in education for Jerusalem University, with Jerusalem University, Master of Gestalt and Group Therapy and Group Dynamics with Tel Aviv University, a PhD, ongoing PhD in Emotional Intelligence and Nonviolent Communication, founder and director of Alternative Center for Peace and Nonviolence Education, working with Israeli and Palestinian people. The main projects, bilingual center with Hebrew and Arabic for Muslims, Christians, Druzians, and others, against violence with women, and narratives and conflict solution through nonviolent means, coordinator of the course of facilitators of healthy sexuality, member of the Two States, One Homeland movement for Confederation of Palestinian Israeli Confederation. Thank you for the presence of you all in this first trip of our journey. David, please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Daniela. Good evening. Shalom Achli, Salam Alaikum. May the peace be with you. Well, a word that can represent that this course is, well, it's too much emotional to be here with you. Thank you very much for your presence. The Congress could be concrete through the incredible efforts of volunteer and activists that believe in the culture for peace and nonviolence, and the education that believe that education for the new generations is the only way that can transform the world with this ideology. And we are experiencing a transition times, and in my book Psychology of Love, I draw a metaphor. Imagine that we are climbing a mountain. with children and youngsters without knowing what we have on the other side of the mountain. We have emotional, spiritual, and physical instruments for the climbing, but we don't know what we'll find on the other side, the unknown that causes us anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. We don't know that what we have in our backpacks will serve that when we reach the top of the mountain, and when we start to go down the other side, well, and with the new generations, that's what happened when the new generations are educated. They are starting a period that when we educators have never experienced before. These transition times divided us in two big blocks. Those who are afraid of this transition, afraid of losing power, the moral values of the past, and they are attached to the problems of the past, trying to break the changes that are already happening through education and media. They transmit the fear ideology. In the other block, without letting alone the past, attaches to the present and the future, a hope for a better world, the solution. We don't know how to prepare the new generations, neither for the present nor the future. I've written this 2 years before the pandemic, and it's been only the first mountain to climb. And I understood that for not having the proper tools, for not knowing the future, we need to prepare the new generation to build the capacity, emotional and spiritual capacities to confront the unknown without fear, and also promoting creative thinking to find new ways of addressing moral and practical dilemma. The idea of the network, this educational network, so raised 5 years ago in my constant discussions with Sergio Strauss, a great friend, great activist for human rights and culture for peace. In our trips to Brazil, Israel, and Palestine, we've approached other educators, and we've arrived to a conclusion of the need to reunite practical and theoretical knowledges and put together organizations and educators promoting culture for peace and promoting a new education. Sergio passed away, but only physically. We keep together in this treading this pathway. And during the pathway, we've gathered all the educators and organizations. Without any financial or infrastructure, we achieved this very day. This Congress is the first step of the Hands for Peace group, Education for Peace and Nonviolence, to share theoretical and practical knowledges. So they have one factor in common: love. Love for what we do, love for children, youngsters, and adults with which we work with, love for nature, animals, Mother Earth, love for life. We are not struggling against fear ideology, against violence. We want to understand the whys, it's polarized, the extreme hatred. Why this fear generating hatred, generating violence, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and other fears and this against isms. Why the fundamentalism in the religions? Understand to discuss our pathway is parallel with them, not against them. Our target is to create a critical mass that capable to develop the narrative of the peace as a core narrative to achieve hearts. Our meetings are not against violence, hatred, and fear, but we are favorable to discussions, to sharing, empathy, hope, love, peace, and non-violence. For this, we need to get together. We are thousands of educators and organizations spread through the world. We are a movement from the bottom to the top, independent educators and small organizations. The Congress and its platform, online platform, it develops during 4 months, exactly to be able to process the knowledge sharing, to analyze them, to reflect on them, and searching for ways of action that could be okay to our realities, to understand the validity of the theoretical and practical models during the discussions. I would like you to enter the Congress website and see the lecturers list and the program. We have lecturers we have in the program Paulo Freire, Pierre Weil, Martin Luther King, Martin Buber, Ney, Janusz Korczak, Marshall, P. Gardner, and many others. Practical models in Brazil, from Brazil, Portugal, Ecuador, Australia, Israel, and Palestine. Models that developed educational systems, the most varied ones, as the Floresta School, the Parliament School, the Open School, the Buddhist School, the bilingual system, and many others. In this period of transition, we need to, first place, to educate ourselves, touching ourself with the seed, so removing the seed of fear, the fear of the unknown, to arrive to the core of the love for life, inner peace, and only in this very moment we will be able to share with the others the educational process of a new relationship of educators and people being educated. I wish we all an excellent Congress, and may the peace be with you. Thank you, Davi, for your Congress opening remarks. And now I will pass the floor to the first lecturer of the night, Dr. Roberto Crema, with the lecture Peace and Ecology of the Meeting. He's a psychologist, anthropologist, and master in human and social sciences with the University of Paris. Trained in several humanistics and transpersonal schools, creator of the art of caring approach, an ecology of being from the perspective of a fifth force in therapy. General coordinator of the first International Holistic Congress in 1987, which led to the creation of the International Peace University, acronym Unipaz, introducer in Brazil of the basic holistic training based on the transdisciplinary approach, and the International College of Therapists, which he coordinated for 20 years. Honorary member of the Luso-Brazilian Association of Transpersonal Alubrat, Fellowship of the Findhorn Foundation, Scotland, rector of the International Peace University, Unipaz Network, author and co-author of more than 30 books. Thank you, Professor Crema. The floor is yours. Good evening. Well, it's a great joy, and I thank Davi and this brave organizing committee that with resilience showed in this pre-Congress that will collaborate for sure for the concrete utopic target that we have, that is peace. And we are converging to the expression in Hebrew, shalem, that is intrinsic to the expression shalom. Davi started with this very expression that it means whole. So first thing we need to understand is what is a Congress for culture of peace? Well, I've been I've been collaborator with Unipaz, the third international university for peace, created, well, the first one with the United Nations and the second one in Costa Rica. But our vocation from the very beginning is education, and we depart with, we have Pierre Weil and Lydia Rebouças, so guardians of Lydia Rebouças, that is a guardian of Pierre Weil legacy, the art of living in peace. And we depart from the very principle that is the paradigm that invented the problem will not be the solution for the problem. If we want peace, actually, we need to understand how to learn, focusing in the very wholeness of the self. And Unipaz fundaments itself in a holistic vision. So the whole and the part and the whole, thinking globally and acting locally, but not crazily. So sometimes we are doing this. And on the other hand, our approach is transdisciplinary. It means it's philosophy, art, science, and spiritual tradition. So discussing among themselves. So an alliance between science and consciousness. And the theme of my speech today is peace and the ecology of meetings, and transdisciplinarity and holistic visions are focused in two main strategies: integration and meeting, and or encounter. So no one transforms anyone, no one frees anyone, no one transforms themselves alone. We transform each and we free ourselves in the encounter, meeting with each other. But what is this encounter? So with the transdisciplinary approach, we have this universe to be explored. And when Unipaz reached 30 years, we have 36 years of history. So sowing the seeds for peace, we've created a considerable critical mass, not only in Brazil. We have 20 units in Brazil, but also in Portugal, where Davi collaborates with us, and in France and Belgium. And what we are seeking for as a network, Unipaz network, is to develop through a deep ecology that is individual. So from where we can have inner peace. So social ecology as well, from where we can have, we can harvest social peace, and environmental ecology as well, from where we can have environmental peace. And when Unipaz reached 30 years, we published a book that tells the history of those 30 years of what Unipaz developed regarding concepts, regarding strategies, but also regarding, when Unipaz reached 30 years of history, I've had an insight, I can say very intense, that, well, three ecologies are not okay. So individual, social, and ecological. We need the presence ecology. It's fundamental for peace, because I think about Krishnamurti, an icon of the presence. So he used it to say that war is the projection, amplified projection of the inner conflicts that are in this very moment operating upon us, each one of us. So from the very beginning, we emphasize the transformation of this small piece of public square, So these very body, the soul, the consciousness dimensions that are crossed by the mysteries of life, cross-cutted by the mysteries of life. So that's why we depart from two fundaments. One is the knowledge. Universities, conventional universities, they dedicate to knowledge. Knowledge is fundamental, but it's not enough. We need to have the other pillar, that is the being. And understanding is precisely in the convergence between knowledge and being. The conventional universities, they developed knowledges, but the being is taken for granted. And it leads to obscurantism, a knowledge that is disconnected of being, but a person that feels that it's only a being. So the being emerging from not knowing, so ignorance, that mentioned by Socrates. So we need to understand how to empty ourselves. So Pierre Weil, he used to say that we suffer from a definition crisis. He invented a verb. We need to learn to how to open spaces to the not knowing, to the unknown. And that's why at Unipaz, in our projects that are centered in those ecologies I've mentioned, on one hand, we have the knowledge pillar, the analytical intelligence dimension, this that we all develop from the very 17th century, the paradigm of the scientific rationale that led to the modern life is intrinsically analytical. However, it's necessary to raise this being awareness. That's why at Unipaz, Pierre Weil defined as holopraxis, pathways to awareness to the very moment. And we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We are finding holopraxis in all knowledges of the history of, for example, in the Christianism, in the Kabbalah, in the Sufi tradition, in the Buddhist meditation, and in the diverse yogas of the Hinduism, in the gnosis, in the arts, xamanic arts, the sacred art craft. But in the 17th century, we've had established the principle of antagonism between the subject and the object, between the knowledge and the being, between the reason and the heart, between sensation and intuition, between sword and growl. And in the bottom line, between knowledge and love.
So, to the peace to be possible, we have to integrate the two hemispheres. You have one, the left, the analytical, the rational, the one that quantify, that has anguish of the human being. You have the right, the melody, the nostalgic tuning, the mystical, the poetry, and you have this front brain that connect both. And you have been fighting because you have a double technology. And you have to find a way to people be whole potentially in each of us. And you know that the opposite of peace is not conflict. The conflict is part of the process. The opposite of peace, as you're going to see in I Ching, the Chinese tradition, is the stagnation. Where you are stagnated in our body, in the soul, in the consciousness, in the relationships, we have lost peace. And I would say health as well. Because when you have a river with a flowing water, and when you have stagnated water, you know what peace is all about, as well as the opposite of peace, what health and the disease. So peace as far as we understand in Edupaz, means the holiness in movement. And for that reason, we need to create this critical mass that minimally we will awake the task of reconstruction. We are facing serious problems. You have acceleration of processes that are degenerative and regenerative processes, and you have obstacles. And I have to talk about obstacles. We were starting this Congress of Peace. You have to focus on implies the impediment to have this utopia, realistic utopia can take place. The challenge of peace nowadays is what Pierre Rival has said, and myself, it's normosis, the pathology of normality. And there are some fundamentals, some principles. I will just go through two principles of normosis. Normosis, because peace is a cult. The normosis is the pathology of the encounter, the mediocrity, the going together without a systemic leadership. Normosis is not always there. It will take place when in the system where you live, we have the unbalanced situation, the egocentric approach, as well as the violence. The lack of care, the lack of vision, the obscurities. Is it normal? You are going to adapt to the system and that is so ill, you're going to keep it? So the old Greek people said that it was the age of iron. Think about the 20th century. You had two walls and small 300 little wars, but so stupid as, and you are in the millennium with the September 11th, you have the religious fundamentalism war, one of the worst, because you have the methodological fundamentalists in the modern age. What have we learning? This is the system where we are in, and the Hindu is Kali Yuga, the Hindu tradition. And a health person is not adjusted, it's out of adjustment. As we are here as coordinators in this Monday, we suffer this lack of adjustment. It's good. We are fighting against the current, as David said, and Serge Storch is in another side of attachment as Pierre Rival. Yes, André Churraqui, that fight for peace, fought for peace actually. And it was a dream of Pierre Rival and André Churraqui. And now is now what we are putting emphasis in this Congress. The normosis means an adaptation of a system that is ill, and you have to go against the current and have symptoms that should be fair enough, and indignation that must be lucid enough, as well as an anguish, a despair that can be lucid. You have to be focused on the present. People are under despair, but lucid, because we don't have enough time. We do not have enough time to correct the track. There are people who really work with the environment. We are in the collision route between the humankind and nature. On the other side, the normosis has an evolutive principle that make human beings different from other species. This is a question mark that's crucial. The human being is the only one that can have the terror these fundamentalists, extremists that you are facing. This is typical from human beings. What about the distinction from other species? The culture would be intelligence? No. Would be language? No. Would be human, good humor, good mood. Einstein said you only have two infinite things, universe and human stupidity. And regarding universe, I have some questions, but stupidity must be studied because it is in this heart, in the core of normosis. It's something so seems to be not so damaged because it is rational, but it's stupid at the end of the day. I do not agree with Einstein that the stupidity is characteristic of a human species. I think that Einstein brought a metaphor that's fantastic, but the stupidity is characteristic of normoses, not the human being, as Confucius said 2,600 years ago, is the unfinished situation. And Paulo Freire, after millennia, got to this concept of the pedagogy of autonomy and liberation and the oppressed people. We are not humans. We make us human. It's not only the brain. You have to invest in our souls, in the consciousness where you have the value of ethics with the heart and the contradiction that is not difficult to face. We are putting the energy on the brain, but we are not really putting energy in the soul. We are kind of a psychic illiterate. And we don't have a consensus. We don't know how to write the ethics in our souls. So, but you have now to go against the current as we're doing here. So I must say that in the evolutive aspect, normosis is stagnation. Is a symptom of an obstacle of flourishing, of a fatal strangulation. You have to flourish. This is our trend, and normosis is a resistance, inertial, idle force. Just to understand the human understanding is not so Darwin. Darwin understood the natural evolution. It's very important to understand the natural evolution. But the human being, as Shannon said, it's not only nature, it's spaces where the nature can learn to be, to serve, pray, love. If you want to understand the human evolutions, besides Darwin research, you have to have a Platon, Chashadana, Gurdjieff, and the cartography of transpersonal modern psychology. So at the end of the day, human beings are very hard work. And you have to really make a transgression against normosis. So we can make the peace prevail, as well as consciousness, the beauty, the good things, the goodwill. So I'm finishing by saying that I have a parable by a friend that is Rabbi Bonder. This is a parable to our moment, the moment that we are facing. The rabbi puts together the community, says, I have a good news and bad news. The good news is the roof of the synagogue is about to fall, and you have to have dollars to repair it. The good news is, and you have the resources to reconstruct it. Good relief. And someone asked, and what about the resources? Where are they? And Rabbi says, in your pockets. I believe that what I would like to share with you is there is a bad notice that's obvious. The roof is falling down under our heads. We have detected the crystal clear symptoms in environmental, social, and individual psychology, but you have resources to reconstruct. And the resources are not in our material pockets, in our brains, but the resources are in our souls and in our consciousness. And education for peace is the education that is comprehensive. This is what makes us together. It's a good combat to have a future to the future generations. And no more than less, these are on the table. Thank you very much for your time, for your attention. Thank you very much, Professor Roberto. Excellent, as usual. So the consciousness of a Kali is the consciousness that we are not going to come through easy points. We are the ones. We have the resources to do many things. Now, we will have Dr. Alessandra. I will have her mini blue, has post PhD, Alessandra Gaidargi. She has PhD in the University Nova de Jesus University in São Paulo. She conferences of a peace conference in Berkeley University in 2020. She is a doctor in cultural, you have a political education in the University of Nova de Julho in São Paulo, expert in professors for universities, launch innovation in the school for MIT and DataWise. Collaborative process and teaching for Harvard, Cambridge, and United States. Bachelor in Social Communication and Pedagogy of Cruzeiro do Sul, São Paulo. 6 giants, isn't she? Now let's have another giant of this night. The floor is yours, Alessandra. I am very happy to be here. It's a great pleasure. If I speak fast, please let me know. Please, translators, let me know about that. The audio is good. Can you hear me well? Yes, great. It's a great pleasure to be here because I am in my collective feeling. That's what Roberto is just said. When people that talk about peace, I have utopia in my heart, and I think we're going to join more people in our life. And it's great to be together. Thank you for welcoming me in this group. I'd like to open my talk by saying that to work with peace is a privilege, as well as it's a brave act, because we have these going forward towards that. And in this Congress is doing a good job because it's difficult to have peace. When you go into depth about these issues, you see the vision of the society is not beautiful. We are revolutionaries. There is no education for peace without a level of revolution. I have the pedagogy of peace in the Freire position. Paulo Freire defends the dialogue. When you have the Freirean dialogue, we are talking about reduction of words. We are talking about listen, talk, and construct. When you dialogue, this empty dialogue, we use the dialogue in a very shallow way, just to express exchange of words. Dialogue is everything. You have a double way. I receive your way of seeing the world. I give mine. So dialogue is dialoguing with the globe and the communities. When you have education for peace, you don't have a really effective purposes for education for peace because you do not take into consideration is a way to go, is not a destination. I cannot really define peace. The definitions that you have about peace, they are negative. It's when you have no violence. It's when you don't have a conflict. A conflict is possible for the human being to have a non-conflict state. You have to have equal human beings, to have the same mindset, to have the same desires, to go to the same direction. And you have a million of people with different desires. They want different destinations. You think that peace, you're going to get there, or the way that you're going to get there? I mean, the way, not the destination. So the peace is ongoing, not to get there. This is the only possibility. So when the schools insist on the issues that to really have peace being taught is to have a specific future, a way that everybody wants to get there. Destination is like the Miss Universe. Nothing against Miss Universe, but to say I would like to have the global peace. This global peace is beautiful. It is there the day that you're going to get that global peace, but it's very dangerous. That is what I must say. It's really dangerous. What Roberto said. This concept of more Moses.
Well, they have wishes, they have an education for peace that take off the wishes. Is that a peace education for peace? Well, and when I talk about it and inside the schools, I talk like when to be peaceful is much more than talk beautifully, talk slowly, and talk sweetly, you know, because people think that, wow, kindness, obviously kindness plays a role, but I can be extremely violent, talking sweetly, educatedly, and I can have a very agitated discussion with my students that is extremely respectable. So these peaceful action, we talk about a possible dialogue, a fair peace inside, well, within the Paulo Freire's concept is a justice and peace, you know, a fair peace. It's not a peace because we stopped struggling. It's because we've achieved a state of consensus that we must be respectful to each other. And this is from Paulo Freire. And a little parenthesis of being Paulo Freire. So to be Paulo Freire is not a kind of a title. So automatically in Brazil, people make lots of connections with your political and political party options. To be Paulo Freire is to have an understanding, so as to look at these thinker supporting its theory in other thinkers. And it says, if without dialogue, we do not go too much far. And to dialogue is to allow the others to get in our world. So to build a world with awareness, it brings this word awareness within education that is very restricted, applied with lots of restrictions today. So from my speech, if you could keep a statement, so peace is not necessarily the absence of differences, it's the coexistence. Peace is coexistence. It's to look to each other. And while you're absolutely my neighbor, it can be absolutely different from me, but I can understand that it's, my neighbor is a human being, and I can divide, I can share my world with my neighbor, and we can create a brand new world from this. And it's impossible to be in peace because we're different each minute. Now I am a person, in some minutes I will be another. So Alessandra entered here as an educator, curious, journalist. No, I entered this event in a way. So, and I've listened to David, to Roberto, Daniela, and to the others. I will leave this event a brand new Alessandra, and you all as well, because at each new moment, each conversation, we transform ourselves. So it's impossible to someone to state, I am peace, but I can be at peace from moment to moment in my relationships. And it's a continuous effort. It's not a place that I reach. For example, 20 hours of meditation, 24 courses and trainings, and I'll be a PhD in something. I am a peaceful person. No, it's not about it. It's a daily exercise. It's a deep exercise. It's an exercise of not being, not accepting things for granted. So I can be different, I can be better, to be not be satisfied, but not being satisfied, dialoguing, discussing. So, and I come from this place that where we see the nonviolent communication. It's nonviolent because it cares for the others. It cares for the respect, 50%. I can be to this limit and the other one comes to this very limit as well, and everything will be all right. It's not peaceful communication. It's nonviolent communication, because no communication could be peaceful because, we have differences. And so when we enter these are, well, for example, in my speeches, when I talk into peace, I take too much care to not be very arrogant, to not be the knower, the peace knower and the peace that I have the last word about peace. No, 5 minutes in the future, I can find another human being. We are all universes, and this human being will be different from me, and they will trigger some new triggers on me. It's an exercise, every day, every time, every encounter. In Brazil, and in Brazil specifically, inside educational culture, it's very strong to have teachers as the owners of the knowledge, and to explain to those knowledge owners that they are not owners of anything. It's difficult. It's a complex and a long-term pathway, and they do this because they learn to do this. And we learn how to be teachers when we see it as students, right? And so there's a whole tradition to be deconstructed to arrive into peaceful, into education for peace. It's not a 2-week training or 5 modules workshop. Every training, every lecture, okay, everything is worth it, because everything can transform ourselves. We enter here and we'll leave here better, but it's not about it. It's an exercise, a daily exercise to be in peace, to be an educator for peace. It's an exercise for human dignity. Look into each other and assume that for me to be what I am, the others, they must be what they are. So human dignity, this is extremely important when we think about dialogical pathway. So it's interesting to understand this dialogicity. It doesn't talk about an absence of divergence, utopian absence of divergence. It's about a movement of the human movement within the world. So through human relationships in a dialogical way. So to dialogue is to divide, to share our world, is to create a world that can be co-existed. And how can we be at peace? Oh, it's a state, it's a human state. It's not simple to achieve this state. If it could be a magical formula, so the owner of this formula would be a millionaire or maybe a billionaire, but we don't have a formula. We don't have an only way, but we have a pathway. We have the masters, the thinkers that came before us that took care of this with a in deepness, and then we can learn from them, and we can compare to our routines and to create different opportunities to improvement. So when I take this to schools, I'm very concerned about it, that teachers understand that it's not about leaving what they've learned, but it's just about learning that there's much more, much more than they've got in their trainings. In peace, it has a lot to do with environment. So I felt very touched by Roberto Crema's speech because peace is environmental for sure. And what happens? So when I have a school culture where I want to introduce by force, in a mass movement, I have a not non-peaceful movement, for example. I can have as much trainings, as I want, but a school that existing inside an organized community, more peaceful, and a school in another community that is apocalyptical community, if I may say, where you have armed conflicts every day around. The reality, the lives, the schools, those schools are totally different. Each school is an organism, is a world, as the human beings are a world themselves. And a school group is a different world. If we do not consider that those worlds, they have specific characteristics, contexts, we cannot have education for peace. Everything that's everything with standards, so are not too much right. I'm against, as much as I study peace dimensions, I get more sure that right and wrong are misleading concepts. But when we try to put a group of students inside a basket, considering they're all equal, you're having a non-peaceful attitude, from the very beginning of the childhood education to the high school education and the university, because and well, maybe in the university you can have a more revolutionary education, and it's about revolution because, what those students are doing there in that education facility, and they're not equal, they're very different in the meetings and the lectures. So, and I hear things that make me, you know, feel wondered. So a teacher talked to me, and now I don't know what to do. I've asked what you want to be when you grow up. So they answered that they want to be soccer players, millionaires, and it's not worth it. I introduce models, different models. I talk about other professions. I talk about other options, but they want to be only millionaires and soccer players. And the girls, they want to marry soccer players. But which models are you taking to them? Because maybe the models you were presenting them are quite inadequate because they cannot absorb. We can only capture what it's part of our reality, what it's part of our dimension. If you present those children, for example, all the references they have in their communities, the people that reached some recognition and some evolution, because recognition is very important, acknowledgement. If their examples are in the community, from their community, are in the sports sector, so you can talk for hours about other options, but they won't capture it because it's outside their contexts. So you need to work from the very context of the people you are approaching. So they need to feel that it's possible. So those children, so they can be scientists, etc. Obviously, but it's that what we it's that what it's what we are doing, trying to make them to wonder, to think bigger. But they need to start from where they can reach, and it's very about peace pedagogy. So respecting the context, so respecting students respecting teachers, the school respecting the context of that community where it is inserted. Respect, so everywhere, respect from between and among, because without those pieces, the organism, the school organism won't work. They only work if all the pieces are doing well in the playing their roles well, because so they are what they are. And so peace pedagogy is about to understand that we are what we are. And it's incredible to be different, from everyone, but we can live at peace with the others. I can get along peacefully and with a fair peace, because peace with injustice is not actual peace. There's a very interesting music, uh, so lyrics that say, so peace without voice is not peace, it's a fear. So a peaceful environment where people cannot stand for what they believe, cannot express their opinion. So this is a school, for example, if it was a school, it would be a school where fear reigns. So a fear for repression, a more severe, more strict education, or fear for the community, because, well, I am quite a little bit different, and if I show myself as I am, maybe I won't be accepted. So every silent reign is coerced by fear. It's not peaceful. Peace has lots of tones. So I think that's it, what I want to bring you. It's the proposition of a dialogical peace within school, from the very initial years, from the very childhood education. It's not a violent peace. When it's a revolutionary peace, but not violent. So revolution is not about violence. Revolution is about to understand that being different, we will not agree with everything, right? But we can disagree with each other without fighting with each other. If we get, in general, not only you here, but the whole members of this Congress, we are absolutely different, from different places, from different cultures, from different religions, and that's just okay. We could sit to have a meal, peacefully, talking, in talking different languages, maybe, but doing some effort to understand each other, but accepting our differences and accepting that we can be different in the world, and to be different is not wrong. So educating for peace maybe is to hold these flagships, everyone is different. But okay, what I do with that, and our society, unfortunately, is each day more getting to, let's be more adequate, let's use more Instagram filters, to be more alike, everyone with the same shoes or the same pants. No, it's nice, it's wonderful to be different in a society where children understand from the very initial years that it's very good to be different. We are we are a species with these willing for to be different, and maybe future societies would be less unfair, less violent, less identified, to make other people to think alike. So these attempt to make others to think alike, to be alike. Different is wrong. Is that right? Well, my similars, are they equal? No. The people that are more similar, for example, In my family, I have people that are familiar to me, but they are different. We marry different people. And sometimes, so it's nice to be with different people. And so children tends to be different from their parents, to teach their parents, because, well, equals, they do not teach each other too much. So I would like to apologize, Alessandra, to go to your final remarks, for we to have the other lecturers to have more time for the Q&A, okay? And because we want to have more time for the Q&A. Thank you. Okay, so you're the most kind people in this world. Thank you, Daniela. So that's it. Just going to my final remarks, I would like to say that I am a fighter. I struggle for the differences, and I'm very happy to be here with you, to keep collaborating with the Congress in the subsequent months. And I would like we to think about a more revolutionary education, but a revolution for the peace. Thank you very much. Sensational. I was here, wandering, I was traveling, I was tripping, with your words. I want to hear much more. So the next one, to close our sequence of lectures, and before Davi's final remarks, Professor Ney Alberto Salles Filho, researcher with the University of Ponta Grossa in Paraná, PhD in education with Ponta Grossa University, with a post-PhD in science and technology teaching with Paraná Federal Technological University, MSc for the Methodist University of Piracicaba, professor of the post-graduation in appliance social sciences, master and PhD in UEPG in Paraná, physical education professor, the undergraduation course, and culture for peace, sustainability and rights for peace, some groups, teaching groups, coordinator of the nucleus of education for the peace, NEP UEPG, acting with human resources training for alternative to violences and qualifications of non-educational and educational spaces. He develops studies on education and teaching methodologies with emphasis focuses in peace for education for peace, school violence, bullying, conflict, addressing conflict with science, and the theoretical dimension of discussing prioritarily the complexity theory and the sociological approaches, and particularly the epistemologies of them. Thank you very much. And I don't know how those professors can do everything of this well. And
with your words, the floor is yours, Professor Ney. First of all, thank you very much, Davi. And on behalf of Davi, I'd like to thank you all that are working to make this a reality. Gratitude to include me in this journey. And after that, I would like to share with you, so you have all these mini bio, to really tell this story about different things that I approach. One thing that I have in the paper, the academic journey, that is part of my life, and the other one that has to do with some points that I'm going to make here. First of all, my graduations to talk about peaceful things, it started from the 21st century with Edupaz. So when Professor Roberto Crema said it's an honor to have this space shared with him, the enormosis is always coming to my mind. What is this normality that you talked about? You are normalized this stupidity and this encounter. This is the first point. And after that, you go through this equation, Paulo Freire, because it's on my baseline of graduation and background in education. Paulo Freire, when had the International Education for Peace by the United Nations, when he had this award in the 70s, he said, I don't believe in a movement called Education for Peace, that instead of have the world of injustice make opaque. And we really make the victims in a position of mediocrity. So, in other words, you have to think about society when you think about peace, about normosis. In the 30 million of brothers and sisters in Brazil that do not have food to eat right now. My story was being told through the experiences, and because I am a professor from a public university, and you have many rules, and you have the other rules of scientific production and so on and so forth. And I asked myself, well, how can I approach these two universes? This is our task in the last 10, 12 years through the Center of Education for Peace. Is an extension project that you work with the formal and non-formal educations, and this research field where you have some points, as Alessandra said, you have the steps. What you do when you have to negotiate public policies with people selling programs of miracle peace programs, you know, X, Y, Z, how can you transform it and put more content for these people who are in these spaces? So, Dani, please, can you share the screen for me, please? The PowerPoint is only the challenge of the 15 minutes, otherwise I cannot stick to the time. It's just to have the support, my speech. We have the group here. Let's go upload it. It's excellent, perfect. So we have this Center of Education for Peace. It is the University of Ponta Grossa, Paraná, has a public service of public education in Maringá, Ponta Grossa. Is a robust system, I would say. So you can carry on, Annie, please. So as a background, my speech is connected with what Roberto and Alessandra talked about, but with other references. It's my speech, the way that I have enough information of studies about peace in an internal perspective in the university. Part of these come from the conflict, peace and violence, relationships, the conflicts that you heard about. The peace is not a lack of a war or a lack of a conflict or a lack of violence, but the peace is everything that we dialogue and make criticisms and raise these violent situations. And to put the conflict as an element that is part of our daily lives in the interpersonal relationships. So let's go briefly, and then we can see the elements, and maybe you can go into depth in another situation. Gaut is from Norway in Oslo's University. He is an international mediator of conflict, and he brings a reference of the process of the violence. You have direct violence, structural violence, and the corporal violence, and you have 3 dimensions. You have other classifications of violence, but you have in a sociological perspective. And let's talk about society itself. So the direct violence is the episode of the violence, is visible. You have different aggressions, physical aggression, sexual, mental violence, the structural violence. You have the violences that are related to poverty, social inequality, social injustice. So you have a social component in it. The direct violence, you can see that the structural violence is not that easy to map the violence. And you have the cultural violence, is what David said, is all the isms, racism, chauvinism, xenophobia, and everything that are there, but even deeper because it is embedded in the society and it's in a long-term conditions. So the first one is a direct violence, is you have the episode, you have the structural, that you have a medium term, and you have this cultural that is a long-term basis. The people that left the underground to really bring all the hatred to all. This is the violence. But you can be in the same level when you think about movements that are thinking about violence and acting violently. So when you have Gauting, you can see the education for peace. How can you have a visible peace, a direct peace? So you have the human relationships, the relationships with the other, this interpersonal relationship. But what is underneath it? So the ones that are not that visible, these are the ones that are not so visible in the relationship with the peace. When you see the peace, you can think it is the Miss Universe, that you have the global peace discourse, and you can see I am a Gandhi, a mini Gandhi. But what about the action? You have this structural violence and the structural peace. You have to really go through this way because you work with education and the public policies. When you have a public policies, you can think, what about the public policy? How can you have a real support to people? Or it's going to be only theoretical. You have something important to think about, the structural peace, public policies, equity, social justice, and cultural peace, tolerance, respect, empathy, equity in a comprehensive manner. And when I think about that, I'm thinking based on my demands in a Brazilian public school in Latin America that has these colonial inputs and slavery inputs very strongly. And you have these multiple layers of violence. When you think about violence, you have to start thinking about the process, direct peace, structural peace, and cultural peace for understanding. But what about in our real life understanding? How educators, politicians, people that make the public policies, how can understand this sense? You have to really translate the reflection. And then you have the elements that are based on the studies of peace and the dimension of Higan Galk, the CPTs, and other authors cover these. You have 4 elements in this culture of peace and education for peace: democracy, human rights, citizenship, and sustainability. And how can you really have the pillars in order to have the culture of peace? The freedom of expression, but not a fake news freedom of expressions. People are confused about that. The freedom of expressions about your dream. How do you think about something? How do you understand, you have the social justice, the solidarity, respect to diversity, multiculturalism, and you have other assets, the assets that are in our lives, feeding, housing, science, education, religious belief. We are surpassed on these aspects in our lives. When you think about a public school, Latin American public schools, how do you manage all these points? So when you have democracy, human rights, citizenship, and sustainability, as David said, 50 years ago, you were in the movement. And now 50 years from that time on, you are working in a movement to guarantee the democracy in the human rights movement. So things are not really resolved. And you are talking together with our friends that work with the culture of peace, and people are tempted to say, yeah, you are dreaming. This is utopia. You say, what about the other model? Do you agree with this? This violent society that things are not working well. So how the education for peace can become a concrete element, not only in our social human practice, social practice, but in the institutional practices. These 4 words, 4 values are crucial, are fundamental. And then the other work that you do are connected to Paulo Freire in a praxis perspective. And it's also connected by Edgar Morin, that had 102 years old. And he's very active. He's writing essays and papers. It was in 2014 that say, educate to peace is to teach the understanding. But let's explain what Edgar Morin means by that. To understand is to put together all the elements of the explanation. In other words, not only have a one explanation element, but diverse ones. You have to ponder and to be coherent and to put together all these different perspectives, to encounter all these perspectives in this dimension that is holistic dimension and a complexity perspective. But the human understanding is not only cognitive because it implies empathy and identification. In other words, it's really a human being that is watching the other one that is sad, the other one that is hungry, the other one that is poem and words, the one that is really understand the pain and the emotion. So when you see the process of education for peace as the teaching of the fundamentals of peace, you have different speakers about that. And even in the academy, in the universities, in the PhD references and master's degree references, they bring these perspectives. All the lack of trust in other people to study peace, but we are having good stuff in this way to go. I'm very pragmatic about the time, so let's stick on these slides. Thank you for passing it on. I brought something for peace studies, just to go on again and again. So the international organizations wrote in the first slide the winner's perspective. especially in the North Hemisphere countries. But in the 90s, there is a very interesting movement of the United Nations where you have, I don't know, remember Fotos Gallic, that it was the general director of the National Union, the United Nations, that talked about the global South. What is going on in Africa? What is happening in Asia, in Latin America? And this movement is very important because it humanizes, in a way, a discussion that international organizations are doing so far. So you have from 30 years on, from this time on, you have the human rights decade, the decade of the culture of peace, decade of education and sustainable development, and you have the United Nations Agenda 2030. And then you see the objectives where you have a letter of intentions of culture of peace. And you have the limits of the geopolitics, and it presents a civilizatory breakthrough. What you have to have in place is to have a sustainability of the life of the planet. The 2030 agenda is a civilization breakthrough. The culture of peace, when you have a violence, is going back. When you have guns, weapons, you are going backwards. Xenophobia, violence against women, elderly, we are going back in our civility, in our civilization breakthrough. So we have to remember that this agenda is an outline that is very important in the universities, so the researchers can get aligned with these. And you have the markers of peace. These are indicators that are being constructed. And this is very important to introduce strongly the culture of peace in the academic perspective and research.
And here I would like to comment with you important things in those years of in this treading this pathway for peace with all the universities. Wanting this discussion about culture for peace goes to the Brazilian guidelines for education, the federal guidelines for Brazilian education. So we know that in this macro discussion, we know that paper theorizes. In the paper we may have everything and the laws and the texts, but the practice is quite different. But we need to be officially in those official papers to create the infrastructure for the peaceful practice. We have people in the front wanting to do good things. We have an open microphone. Well, what people do in their lives, we may think about this, the center, the parliament, the Ministry of Education. So we need to discuss with those institutions, and they need a little bit more. They need to be more. We need to be more provocative with them. How to be provocative with those official institutions. It's much more difficult to reach those levels, but it's fundamental because in Brazil, in the last 4 years, we've had on a daily basis the incentive to the arm, to guns, and to hatred. So the president of the republic used it to be incentivizing every day on a daily basis arms, guns, and hatred. And we need to take back, the discussions about human beings, hungry human beings, not you know, bring in the themes of not taking a vaccine or not. So we need to retake what was predicted in the 2014 educational guidelines to the official laws. You know, it's been approved changes in 2018. One of them, to promote measures of awareness, prevention, and fight and combat against any kind of violence, especially systematic intimidation, bullying, and the school environment. So this paragraph talks about the object of the violence studies, the more hardest part. But it was needed to write about culture for peace. So establish actions aiming, promoting culture for peace in the school environment. So we have in the official laws, Brazilian official laws, something about culture for peace. In the same law, it's not written that civic military schools may be part of the framework, of the educational framework. But we have culture for peace. It seems to be a little step, but it can be big. But teachers, they may think how they will fit as a cross-cutting theme. No, it's not about, as Professor Alessandra said, class lectures for peace, you know, classrooms for peace. No, you're supported by the Brazilian official guidelines for education, you know, establishing a cross-cutting theme for peace. You know, the Secretariat for Education, they may argue you, but when I'm thinking about establishing a peaceful structure, peaceful framework in the schools, I'm supported by the official laws. Well, just to mark this idea, go into my final remarks. Well, through the researchers in our Education for Peace nucleus, we found some points through names or nicknames that the peace projects happen in Brazilian schools and in the most part of Latin America. We have many projects talking about peace, but coming with this label of human value. You know? Project for human values. Well, other schools, they work with human rights. And recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, we are having very strongly these approaching conflict with science because of restorative justice. I have some observations, but it's a good beginning. It's a matter of mediation at school. So education for peace through eco training brings the 2030 agenda themes, and it's like to bring this discussion about spirituality in education, not religions, you know, but spirituality in the sense Professor Leonardo Boff writes about. So environmental projects, eco training, and the last field is existing and coexisting. So some schools, they do not have these characteristics of thinking they are doing something for the peace without knowing that. They have some good things, but some complicated things like making students drawing a white pigeon, you know, it must be a white pigeon. And the other day, you know, students, they just take off those white pigeons from the wall, you know. But we have those 5 big fields, practical fields happening in the Brazilian education and by standard in Latin America as well. So those projects are not sustainable because some projects linked to values, they let alone human rights, or they are working on values, you know, trying to say you must love your neighbor, you must respect each other. So it doesn't work with the must, you know. And the projects we've been studying, assessing and sharing, thinking about the school structure, when they get closer to values, but also bring rights about approaching conflicts with science, discussing about environment and existing and coexisting. So they establish a kind of interesting strategy, to approach all this. And here I could deal with that with a flow chart, like that framework of Unipaz. Professor Crema mentioned the three pillars: environmental, social, and inner peace. No, I'm almost finishing. Please, next slide. I think this is penultimate one. So the same thing with other colors. So just existing and coexisting. So enjoyment activities, the body activities, body awareness activities are in the core, in the core of other dimensions in the surroundings. This slide I will read very quickly. We have this and just one more. I didn't mention literature reference, but what lots of researchers studying culture of peace are talking about, what characterizes a violent person and a non-violent person. So any similarity with facts, people, or real events, it's up to you. What characterizes a violent person? So violent, truculent, unbalanced, bystander. And hates diversity and deals difference as enemy. So unvalue or devalorize, devalue the culture and history and try to build narratives without the proper foundation, despise democracy and highlights dictatorships, despise science and education, despise environment, only sees economics as an alternative for the world. To have is much more important than to be. It's not concerned about physical health, mental, spiritual. They want to fight, they want to curse, they want to beat people up and hate. Well, and a culture for peace, it's a training to be a peaceful person. So a respectful, peaceful and balanced person, recognize diversity as a complement for the societies, values general culture and recognize the importance of a cultural background that's built with quality, with proper facts, values democracy and understands human rights as dignity. It values, they value science and education and regard the environment in a good position. It perceives importance of economics related to human dignity, understands the importance of health and well-being. So they prefer to dialogue and to address conflict without violence. So this table is a synthetic, it summarizes the discussions we have, the data we've got from the more recent researches. Last slide, please. And here I put some important references. Well, we don't have space for all the collaborators from Chico Mendes and Mrs. Malala, Giulio Lancelotti, and all the classic references, Paulo Freire, Marielle Franco, Betinho, Zilda Arns. So they're all fundamental, but the background is, it's about what we can build to try to look, to look forward, to look beyond, but also looking closer to what is in the surroundings. So thinking about the schools, the social movements from the places where where I coexist. So sorry for being so fast. Apologize with the translators, and I will be at your disposal for the Q&A. Extraordinary. So as one can in 20 minutes to put together two demands, so time, so redistribution, recognition of identities, putting all together in 20 minutes. Incredible, congratulations. So I would like to say that, so those are the demands of our day's event. And we are keen on the next lectures of our Congress. Thank you, Professor Salles Filho. Now I pass the floor to the President to our chairman and Mr. Davi Windholz, please, for the final remarks. Well, it's been very joyful. I've been learning, a lot with those 3 lectures. So it's been incredible, like how different people, different from different worlds, we are all favorable to culture for peace, education for peace, but each one of us, we have our philosophy, our modus operandi. Well, I departed from education in 1977 when I was studying pedagogy in University of Jerusalem with a great philosopher of education in Israel, and he was close to Paulo Freire, and we worked in a project in a favela in a slum, and it's been the first pillar, the conceptual pillar for my training. And just after I studied Gestalt, where we talk about therapy. The foundation of the Gestalt therapy is, well, as much heterogeneous the group, better you will be your work, because the differences, they create the inner conflicts, of you asking if if what you are is right or wrong, and you have a reflex, you have mirrors to look at. So you look to the others, but you don't see yourself. You see different models of being, different models of behavior. So, and then you ask yourself, so where am I? And where are the others? And what can I get from the others? And this heterogeneity theme is one of the basic things in education for peace. It's impressive. So I've looked at all the 35 lecturers for this Congress coming from the most different places, from 7 different countries. All of them, they have a very determined structure. So different models. Professor Salles Filho put some illustration to us, some pictures. We started the Congress with Nelson Mandela's statement, so quotation. We do not born hating each other. So to hate each other, we need to be taught. And if we can learn to hate, we can learn to love as well. And I won't enter in my model, just not to, well, we would be out of time for sure, but I would like to state some points, common points that common points to all the theories, but each one bringing its very particular context. And despite my 40 years of education, in much more in a practical way, I've learned from 3 different people from different worlds. And I imagine how much I will be learning from 34 lecturers. I will be the 35th, but I can learn from myself as well. Who knows? Alessandra said that Paulo Freire says educators can be educated as educators. So when Roberto Crema stated something about to be holistic. So we all believe the human beings as a holistic being, and it's a sensorial, it's cognitive, it's emotional, and it's rational. I would put to this triangle the spiritual part, what Roberto Crema talked about. And the second thing is the experience. It's enough to, and we are enough of beautiful words. We need to experience. If we want a democracy, it's not worth it to talk about democracy. We need to use Janusz Korczak model. Mr. Dennis will be talking about. So that is, we have a parliament, a school parliament. the school community parliament where children are entitled to have the floor, as the teachers have, same rights. And the dialogicity, Roberto and Alessandra talked about dialogicity. Roberto talked about the encounter, the ecology of the encounter. So that's what I call bilinguity. In Israel, in our center, we use bilinguity. So Jewish, they talk Hebrew, and the Palestinian, they talk Arabic. We do not have a common language. Many times we use English. In my activities, in my activities, English is forbidden because English is not part of their realities. It's not part of their communities. It's not part of their religion. It's not part of their culture. It's not part of their history. And when we talk about languages, we are bringing a whole world that represents the external and internal contexts of those children. So we have translators. Palestinians, they talk in Arabic, and the Jewish in Hebrew, and we have everything translated all the time. We've created a model for this to respect the differences and for the children to feel the safest as possible with their own culture. Third thing, it's a matter of a reduction of my power as an educator. So I'm not the owner, the truth owner. I'm not that one to impose a concept. I won't determine the students' activities. And psychology, we have a Kabbalistic psychology, and we state that in that Kabbalistic psychology, that God occupied the whole space in the universe, and to give human beings the opportunity to create, God needed to let an empty space where human beings can create. And that's what we as educators, we need to do. We need to reduce our spaces, our powers, reduce our charisma for the children, for the students to have a space where they create and we learn from them. So the greatest question here is, and then Professor Roberto used the word normosis, like, well, as culture for peace, we are a movement of socialization or transformation movement. Well, obviously, my conclusion is our education is transformative. We balance, I don't know how to say this word in English, to disrupt the normosis that Roberto commented about, this normality. So it disrupts the normality. It creates question marks and not exclamation marks. Our work here for the Education for Peace is to transform all the points, exclamation marks in question marks.
Another point that is very important in other situations is the transformative education. Alessandra talks about that. I was in this first session and I listened to Roberto and the other one that Alessandra and then I transformed myself. I'm not the same David that I was in the beginning. I always have my monitors that work like this, coordinators. If you are the same when you started, there was no educational process in place. So the children didn't learn. And the educational process will take place when at the end of the process, you felt that you transformed yourself. And the last point that Nate talked about, and very well, is the praxis. we cannot only talk, we need to have birds and have beautiful quotes and sentences to reflect back about that. No, we have to have a practical action in the school community and outside the community school in the bigger society, an action that can bring the culture of peace, the education for peace, to a practical system, to an action. Is not to be philanthropists or to have a campaign of clothes or food. No, it's not to give the fish, but to give the tool to go and fish. This is the fishing app. This is the process that you have to do with the children. And the thing that is amazing, you have an Olympic that you have in Brazil, Fafá de Belém, the singer said so. Maybe I imagined, but she said that so straightforward that people didn't listen. But someone asked her, and she said, in the Olympic, we are experiencing the common and celebrating the different. This phrase is the logo mark of my center. We have the common sense, but we celebrate the differences. And through the differences, we can create a process that is really transformative in the educational perspective and in ourselves as human beings. At the end, I would like to make a point that within Judaism, you have tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is when you have to repair the world. The repair of the world has a lot to do with the Roberto said about 4 or 5 levels. First level, I myself, how can I be tomorrow a better person? Second layer, how can I improve the life of my community? And this third, in the planet, how can I improve the life perspective of the planet? All the process of transformative education without reflection, without praxis, without action, it does not make sense. I can reflect, but I don't act. No culture of peace is in place. And I can only act without reflection. I do not have the culture of peace. You have to have the reflection, the internal reflection of doing this introspection, and this introspection that will bring and being transformed into an action. This is what I would like to share with you. And I would like just to wrap up with an example of our system, educational system. In our educational system, when you work with children, we have 3 basic rules for the educators. The children, they can go freely to any activity. The monitor cannot shout, and there is no punishment. And the monitors ask me, what about David? Without these elements, you don't have power on the children. That's great. I don't want you to have a power over children. The only way of you doing something is dialoguing with the children. Is really go on the same level, eye to eye, and talk to the children. Really feel what they are feeling, to know why they are not in your activity. Maybe your activity is not something that is part of the reality of the children. The 4th element is that you have a commission of mediations of children from the first to the sixth level, together with monitors. When you have a conflict, the children will solve the conflict. One day I was there and I saw a child taking a flower from the garden in a place that we were invited. I shouted at her. And I called her attention, shouting. I was nervous. So that I saw that. And there was a child from the commission. The commission, it's Malachia, Shalom, the angels of peace. People are asking you your presence. Maybe the angels of peace wanted to have my advice, but there was a child from the third level of education and said, we need the mediation. David shouted at me, and it's forbidden to have people shout at the other person. So you had a dialogue, a mediation, and a child of the fifth grade said, at the end of the day, you know what I have to do? Excuse yourself. I said, okay, accept. He asked the child and said, it can be a good solution. He said, yes, it's a good solution. At the end of the day, in the parliament, I had 150 children around me, and I said, sorry for being rude at you. So the impact of these experience is much more powerful than the dialogue, democracy classes. You know what I mean? Because at this moment, the director of the campaign, I was there and I said, sorry, because I didn't, I broke the law. We had this agreement and I broke the law. This is the culture of peace, is the experience, is the dialogue, is understand the feeling of the children. And you're going to have all these experiences through our Congress. You have different points from 35 speakers, and Alessandra will be again with us, and Ney will be again with us. And unfortunately, Roberto will not be with us, but Roberto, you have a very good substitute that is Lydia, that is with us, that you bring the art of living in peace. And we will have 32 speakers, first class speakers in a theoretical and practical perspective. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Daniela, Ney, Roberto. Daniela, excellent mediation. And then we are going to talk about the future, the next meetings. Thank you for being here with us. Bye-bye.